Hungarian Folk Tales. A fox seeks shelter. Once upon a time, there lived a wily fox. The old fox was hungry, and so he took a sack and left his home. He walked and walked until the sky grew dark, and he stood outside the house of a rich farmer. He knocked hard on the door, and when asked who was there, he replied, "I'm a poor traveller in need of shelter for the night. Will you take pity on me?" The rich farmer had a good heart, and so did his wife. They let the fox come in and offered him supper. "Kind sir, are there no thieves around the house? I have a fine fat cockerel in my sack, and I wouldn't like to have it taken in the night." "Worry not, Mr. Fox. Nothing has been stolen in my house. You can sleep in peace." "Oh, poor me, my fine fat cockerel has been stolen." They all searched high and low, but no one could find the cockerel anywhere. The rich farmer was so ashamed that a guest of his had been robbed, and he felt sorry for the old fox as it wailed and moaned. But what could he do? He gave the fox a fine fat cockerel of his own and wished him well. So the fox left with a grateful grin on his whiskered face. He walked and walked until the sky grew dark and knocked hard on the door of a second farm. Good people lived in this house, and he was welcomed once more. As they were about to go to bed, the fox began to scour the room as if searching for thieves. "Kind sir, let me tell you that I have a fine fat goose in my sack, and I wouldn't like it to be stolen in the night." "Worry not, Mr. Fox. Nothing has been stolen in my house. You can sleep in peace." The fox waited for these fine folk to fall asleep, and he opened the sack. And what was in the sack? Why, the cockerel, of course. He took the fat fowl out and ate it all up, feathers and all. "Oh, poor me, my fine fat goose has been stolen." They all searched high and low, but no one could find the goose anywhere. The farmer then gave the old fox a fine fat goose of his own to stop him crying and moaning so. He walked and walked until the sky grew dark, and he stood outside a third house. He knocked again, was let in again, but before they went to bed, he turned to the farmer and said, "I've put my sack here under the bench, kind sir, but I can't rest in my bed because I should tell you, kind sir, that I have got a fine fat piglet in it." "You can sleep in peace, Mr. Fox," the farmer assured him. "No matter what is in your sack, there will be no trouble here." "Oh, poor me, my fine fat piglet has been stolen." They all searched high and low, but no one could find the piglet anywhere. What else could the farmer do but give the fox a fine fat piglet of his own. When the sky grew dark that night, the fox knocked at another door. They let him in, and again he said the same before they went to sleep. "Kind sir, please look out for thieves this night, for I have a fine fat pig in my sack, and I wouldn't like it to be stolen." The farmer glanced at the sack and saw that it had no fine fat pig inside, and knew from its squeals that it was only a piglet. But the wily fox didn't go to sleep. He ate the piglet up, curly tail and all. As soon as the sun rose, the fox began to moan, "Oh, poor me, my fine fat pig has been stolen." The farmer immediately saw the trick and pretended to feel sorry for the old fox. "Don't be so sad, and don't wake the village with your moaning. I'll give you 2 fat pigs instead of 1. Give me your sack so I can put them into it outside." The master went outside with the sack. He had 2 hungry foxhounds. He put them into the fox's sack, tied it up, gave it to the fox, and wished him well. When the wily old fox opened the sack, he saw no pigs. And what should jump out of the sack but the 2 hungry foxhounds? The fox ran as fast as his red legs could carry him. He forgot about his belly and wanted to save his furry hide. But the hungry foxhounds caught hold of his tail and tore him to shreds. If they hadn't, my story would never end. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Jackdaw Girls. Once there lived a mother who had 12 daughters. The 12 girls were very unruly and each had a big mouth. They were always quarrelling with each other. There was never any peace in the house, and one day their mother decided that enough was enough, and so she said, "My ears are full with your quarrels. All of you should turn into jackdaws." They flew through the open door with such haste that they nearly poked her eyes out with their wings. They left the house and took to the air. They disappeared in a westerly direction. The mother became very sad as she missed her daughters very much, but there was nothing to be done. Then she discovered that she was expecting a baby, and when the time arrived, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When the boy became a little older, he began to ask his mother, "Mother, have I never had a sister or a brother?" And his mother replied, "I have never had any other child except for you, my boy." But later on, the boy heard the talk in the village that he used to have 12 sisters who turned into jackdaws and flew away forever. "Mother, I have heard in the village that I used to have 12 sisters. I will not rest until I find them all." His mother tried to keep the boy at home, but to no avail. So then she filled a sack full of food and let him leave. As the boy was walking, he caught sight of a hermit's shack in the distance, and he arrived there just as the sun was setting. An old woman lived in the little shack, and he had never seen an older woman in his life before. He greeted her. "Good day, old lady." "You are fortunate that you greeted me politely, or else I would have eaten you up. What are you doing in this place that has never been seen by man or beast before?" The boy then told the old woman that he was searching for his 12 sisters who had turned into jackdaws and flown away. "Good. In the morning we shall make inquiries about them." Then she made supper for the boy and they went to sleep. Early the next morning, the old woman stood outside with the boy beside her, and she blew hard on an old whistle. All the reptiles of the world gathered around in a matter of moments. The old woman asked the reptiles about a flock of jackdaws that never mixed with the other birds. None of the reptiles had any useful answers to her questions, and so the old woman ordered the reptiles to go home. So they all slithered away. The boy bid farewell to the old woman and left her. After a day's walk, he again arrived at a hermit's shack. He entered the shack and saw an old woman even older than the first. "Good evening, old lady," he said. "You are fortunate that you greeted me politely, otherwise I would have ordered bears to tear you apart. What are you doing in this place that has never been seen by man or beast before?" The boy told her the aim of his search. "Good. Maybe tomorrow morning we shall learn something more about your sisters." The boy went to bed and soon fell fast asleep. The next morning, the old woman stood outside the front door with the boy and blew hard on an old whistle. All the four-legged beasts of the world gathered around the house in a matter of moments. "Do you know anything about 12 jackdaws that always fly alone?" "We know nothing of such birds, and we have never heard of them before," the four-legged beast replied. So the old woman sent them home with a wave of her hand. Then the boy became very sad indeed. He thanked her for her troubles and continued on his way. As he was walking, he spotted a third hermit's shack atop a huge rock, and he arrived there as the sun was setting. He walked into the shack and saw that this woman was even older than the two before her. "Good evening, old lady. You are fortunate that you greeted me so politely, or else I would have had eagles tear you to shreds. What are you doing in this place that has never been seen by man or beast before?" So the boy told her the story of his journey. "Don't be sad, my child. I am sure that tomorrow we shall hear something about your sisters." Then she made the boy something to eat and made his bed. As soon as the sun came up, the two of them stood at the front door and the old woman blew hard on a whistle. All the winged creatures of the world gathered around the house in a blink of an eye. The old woman inspected the birds and then said angrily, "Someone is missing." Soon a raven arrived and one of its wings was bleeding. "As soon as I heard your whistle, I began to fly here, but while I was flying, I saw a tall red tower. Tower was so tall that it stuck up through the clouds. And the noise the jackdaws made in that tower was worse than anything I had ever heard before, so I decided to rest a while and listen for myself. People passing by made mention of 12 jackdaws. They said that they had been living there for some years now and never let anyone go near them. But as I was eavesdropping, a hunter came along and shot a bullet into one of my wings. That is why I was late to arrive." Yours was the story we needed. You other birds can go now. So now you know where to go. Your efforts will not be in vain. When you arrive outside the tall red tower, lay these bones down on the ground and think of me. He set out once more, and after many days he arrived at the tall red tower. He did as the woman told him, and the two bones grew into a long ladder, and he could climb up to the jackdaws. He entered a large room where he found 11 of the jackdaws away, and the 12th in the form of a girl. The others were away collecting food. The young girl was afraid at first, but soon she became braver. She showed the boy around their home and explained all that she knew. Then the boy confessed that he was in fact their brother, and he had found them at last. Then they heard the noise of the jackdaws flying home again. So the young girl said, "Hide yourself quickly, because if I am unable to explain who you are, they will surely peck your eyes out." So the girl hid the boy in the 7th room. The 11 jackdaws soon arrived home, where they did a somersault and turned back into girls. Then the eldest of all said, "I can smell the presence of a stranger." And she tossed furniture around in her frantic search for the stranger. Then the youngest girl calmed her sisters and said, "When we left our father's house, our mother was heavy with child. She gave birth to a boy. That boy has spent many months looking for us, and now he is here to take us home to our mother and father. I hid him because I was afraid you would do him harm, because you didn't know why he was here or why he had come." Then the girls went to their brother, and they all embraced him. Before starting home, they all swore to always be good from now on. They climbed down the ladder, and the boy led them home. When they returned to the home of their birth, their mother and father were overjoyed to see their 12 daughters again. From that day on, the girls behaved so very well that they were the pride of their village. All 12 of them found a husband within the year, and all got happily married. And their brave brother found a pretty girl to be his bride, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. First the dance, then the feast. Once upon a time there lived a poor man. He had even more children than a sieve has holes, and he owned nothing more than a small house. But then the poor man was forced to move out of his home because his landlord wanted so much corn in payment for his rent that he had to leave. And so the poor man decided to hide. In the forest, he met an old man, and the old man asked the poor man where he was going. The poor man told him about his landlord's cruelty. "Don't be so sad, poor man, because I shall give you a fiddle, and whenever you play it, your landlord will dance." The poor man happily took the fiddle, but told the old man that he was still very hungry indeed and he could not return home with a fiddle. Then the old man gave him the gift of a table. "Whatever you wish for will appear on this table." So the poor man slapped his hand hard on the table and shouted, "Porridge and beans." And when the poor man's belly was full, he set off to go home. When the poor man arrived, he discovered that his cruel landlord had already evicted his dear wife and darling children. "Now I shall pay and you shall dance," and the poor man began to fiddle. And the poor man's landlord danced and danced and danced and grew very tired indeed. But as the poor man played as long as he could, his landlord kept on dancing. When the poor man took a rest, the landlord ran back to the mayor's office to report that he wouldn't stop fiddling. But the poor man followed the landlord back to the office and began to fiddle again. "Dance, landlord, dance!" Then the landlord danced into the office and shouted. The men in the office soon grew bored with the poor man's fiddling and they ordered him to leave at once. "Now you should dance too," the poor man commanded. And everyone in the mayor's office began to dance around. They put down their pens and danced a merry jig together. Then the policeman heard the news and ran to the mayor's office. "Get out of here, poor man!" But the poor man shouted, "Now you should dance too!" And the policemen all began to dance around. The women sent word for policemen to come from the next village, and these policemen soon arrived and tried to chase the poor man away. Now you should dance too. Now the whole marketplace was filled with people dancing around. Then the soldiers marched up and the poor man said, "Now you should dance too, as best you can." News of the dancing finally found its way to the king's ears. "Now the king should dance too," the poor man demanded. So the king joined in the frantic dance. The queen of the kingdom contacted the king from the neighbouring land, and this king arrived with his army, and the country was soon filled with his foreign soldiers. The second king called upon the poor man to desist. The two dancing kings put their crowns down at his feet and gave him their lands. So peace returned, and the dancing eventually ended. Now all the dancers had grown so hungry and asked the poor man to feed them at last. The poor man took out his table, slapped it and said, "Porridge and beans." Then everyone sat down to enjoy the meal, and the tiny table made more and more and more of the food. The people standing next to the table were lucky, but the ones at the back could not reach the porridge pot, and the people pushed the kings into the beans. The king's shouts were soon drowned out, and both kings drowned in the big pot of beans. No one felt sad that the kings had gone, and all pushed forward to eat their fill. Everyone ate and ate till all was gone, and they all had a splendid time indeed.